On May 24th, 2023, the Washington Wizards officially hired Michael Winger as their president of Monumental Basketball, which basically gave him full leadership over the Washington Wizards. This is huge. Washington was looking to move on from Tommy Shepard after he had some pretty questionable years in Washington, and who better to get than the man who was able to bring Kawhi Leonard and Paul George to the Clippers. And Michael Winger decided that he wanted to hire Will Dawkins to become their official general manager. And with all of these big moves in the front office, one had to not think, but know that some big changes were coming in Washington very soon. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Earlier in the month, the Washington Wizards decided they were going to deal Bradley Beal to the Phoenix Suns for Chris Paul and Landry Shamet, along with some picks. Now, this was no surprise because, as we know, Phoenix was looking to add the extra piece. Some people were thinking it was going to be James Harden, but Bradley Beal has been a hot name on the trade market for years. Now, some people didn't think he was going to get traded, because he has the biggest contract in the league, and on top of that, he had a no trade clause. But it was clear that his time in Washington was coming to an end. I mean, Bill had been in trade talks basically since John Wall left, and him going to Phoenix just seemed perfect. I mean, many of us, including me, thought he was going to Miami, but one thing we knew for sure was that he was going to get out of Washington. Now, from the Wizards' point of view, people were criticizing them. I mean, they were saying you got Chris Paul, who's most likely going to get bought out, and Landry Shamet for Bradley Beal. It's kind of an undersell, but you have to understand, Bill had a lot of leverage, and no team was really willing to give up that much for Bill. And they aren't necessarily in the wrong for that. I mean, Bradley Beal played just 50 games this year, and the year before that, he played 40. I mean, no team really wants to give up that much for an injury-prone dude who's the highest paid player in the league who doesn't produce like it. On top of that, Bill wasn't playing like the 30-point scorer that we saw back in 2020 and 2021. He had regressed to 23.2 points per game, and that didn't really seem too enticing for too many teams. Little did we know, this is only one of the first moves that the Wizards were going to make, and over the past couple of days, they've made some huge splashes. And at midnight, that's exactly what happened. Now, we have been hearing for a couple of days that the Celtics were looking to make a deal to get Kristaps Porzingis on the roster. Now, at first, Malcolm Brogdon was supposed to go to the Clippers, and there were some other details, but that trade ended up falling through because Malcolm Brogdon has some injury concerns. So, instead of the Clippers being the third team ended up being Memphis. And the full trade details is as follows. Memphis got Marcus Smart, Boston got Kristaps, the 25th pick, and a 2024 first-round pick, and Washington got Tyus Jones, Danilo Gallinari, Mike Muscala, and the 35th pick. This was yet another trade that people looked at and they was just scratching their head when looking at the Wizards, but it's a couple of things you got to take into consideration. Tommy Shepard and the old front office put this new front office in one of the worst predicaments ever. They were the definition of mid. They had a bunch of high paid players on their roster who really weren't worth all that money, and on top of that, they weren't bad enough to be in the lottery, like high in the lottery. We're talking top 5, but they weren't good enough to be outside of the lottery and competing for the 5th or the 6th seed. And at this point, everybody was anticipating a big, and I mean a big haul for Washington, and they're doing that so far. Now, first, of course, it does look like Washington was very underwhelming with some of their moves. You move off 2 of your arguably best players on your team, and all you have to show for it is Tyus Jones, a couple other players, Chris Paul, who's probably going to leave, and some picks. But on Thursday, June 22nd, 2023, we realized once again that this Wizards front office was not done, and they decided that they were going to deal a player who many thought would get bought out, and being Chris Paul for Jordan Poole. Now, of course, there were some rumors about Jordan Poole being traded because of what transpired in the offseason between him and Draymond, and just some stuff that transpired throughout the season with locker room issues, him having a big head, allegedly, and all this other stuff. But nobody in their right mind thought that the Wizards of all teams was going to be able to get him for somebody like Chris Paul, who, let's be honest, probably wasn't going to be seeing major minutes on the Wizards this season. Now, here are the full details of the trade. The Warriors are sending Jordan Poole, a protected first-round pick in 2030 and a second-rounder in 2027 to the Washington Wizards for Chris Paul. And then at that point, a lot of people started to sit back and look at what the Wizards got from this haul. And when you look at it, it really isn't that bad. Check this out. The Wizards Wizards now have a core of Poole, whoever they decide to take at the 8th pick, Tyus Jones, Denny Avdia, Daniel Gafford, Year 2 Johnny Davis, Cody Kispert, and Ryan Rollins. That's a solid core if you ask me, and who knows, the franchise centerpiece could be hidden in that 8th pick that they will make tonight. And when you look at it in hindsight, the Wizards were able to turn Bradley Beal on a bad contract and Kristaps Porzingis, who is most likely out the door, into Poole, 6-second pick swaps in 2028 and 2030, and they got some nice key role players who could be pivotal in the future. And if you ask me, that isn't bad at all. I mean, when you look at what they were before and the direction they were headed, Washington was headed towards mediocrity. I mean, they hadn't really been that good since 2017. They hadn't really been competitive or a threat to anybody in the East really in a long time. And this move, it adds a lot of things for Washington. It's a nice refresh, and on top of that, you get some new faces in. Bradley Beal trade was way overdue, and they didn't really give up too much for it. And you got a Jordan Poole who this season was able to average 20.4 points, 4.5 assists, 2.7 rebounds on 57.3% true shooting. Now, I know this year wasn't Jordan Poole's best year. There were a lot of struggles with the Warriors, especially with Steph Curry going out, and the Warriors as a whole looking very, very rough without them. But you can't deny the potential that Jordan Poole holds. I mean, this is the same dude who last season, when Steph was out and Steph was coming out the bench, he was averaging like 30 and he was going crazy on anybody you put in front of him. Now, of course, there are still some questions. One being, are the Wizards done? There are some other pieces on that roster that I can see them getting rid of. Two being, what is their plan with Jordan Poole and who are they going to pick with the 8th pick? Now, by the time this video comes out, y'all will probably already know that, but is this guy that they will pick with 8th pick able to mesh well with Jordan Poole and the rest of that roster? Now, if you ask me, I think Washington has a bright future ahead of them. Y'all know how I feel about Jordan Poole in my video I put out last year detailing the Warriors, and in that video I described Jordan Poole as being a very special talent, and him getting a new change of scenery and most likely going to have the freedom that he didn't have in Golden State. I think he will flourish in that role. Of course, there's still going to be some growing pains as he is a young up and coming player, but that's how it is with every young player. And I think with a nice change of scenery, the good work ethic he has, and not as much pressure on his shoulders, I think he'll flourish. And I think what this front office is doing and the overhauling of this roster and bringing in young guys with potential is amazing. I mean, y'all know my motto: if your team isn't too bad but your team isn't too good, then you're doing something wrong. And I think this new front office saw what the old front office wasn't willing to admit. We have a team that isn't too bad to be top 5, but they're not really that good to be contenders. So what they did was they said, we're going to go out, get some young players and get some picks, whether we want to trade them or whether we want to get players with them, and we're just going to rock out from there. And I love that. But we can only wait and see what actually ends up happening. That's all I have for now. Now, let me know how you guys feel about this trade in the comments. Let me know whether you love what the Wizards are doing or you're not totally on board with the vision. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it, and make sure you subscribe. And that's all I have for now. So until next time, peace.